right, so we were discussing lost you there on the line. We were discussing what the Babylonians were eating, and it doesn't sound like it was a biblical-based diet, from what I hear.
No, it was, although it certainly was biblical times, it was certainly not a biblical diet. No, they were eating a lot of meat, as I mentioned, and a bunch of other unhealthy things. And Daniel said, well, you know what? I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah,
and so he said, yeah.
So going back to this sort of challenge of the king, what was the challenge and what happened?
Well, this challenge, actually, if you look in the New England Journal of Medicine, it's referred to not just as a challenge, but actually the first clinical trial that was ever recorded in history.
Okay.
Basically what it was, Daniel said, well, you know what? I don't want to have this rich food, and my friends don't either. He had 3 friends with him. And he said, can we just have some, a vegan diet? Basically what they asked for, just vegetables, beans, anything that grew from a seed, and water. No milk, no juice, not even juice, just basically vegetables, fruits, nuts, grains, seeds, and beans and such, and water. And the guy replied, the guy that was kind of his head, his manager, if you will, or his supervisor, said, Daniel, what if the king sees you on that diet and you're not looking so good? You aren't looking that healthy. You aren't getting enough protein on that diet, Daniel. And then I said, just try it for 10 days. Just try it for 10 days. And see, and if we're doing worse than everyone else, it's fine. We'll not worry about that. We'll go on the diet that you recommend. And after 10 days, they were found to be not only more physically fit, but also more intellectually capable than anybody else in their whole school. And not only that, but at the end of 3.5 years, they were allowed to continue that diet for the rest of their time there at Babylon University, as it were. And they were actually found to be 10 times wiser than even the wisest of the king's advisors who were serving him at that time, and whether in matters of state or war or even spiritual matters as well.
So, and if I recall, I thought there was also a physical dimension to it. Like they were...
Yes. They were physical. They were better looking.
Or stronger.
Yeah. They were better looking, they were stronger, they were faster, they were more agile, they were more capable, physically as well as mentally. You're right. I did briefly mention that, but it is true. It did affect their physical form as well. They were physically more healthy, they were fitter and stronger, they were more capable. And that carries true even to today. Some of the world's strongest men are vegan vegetarians.
Depression rates in this country are skyrocketing. Anxiety rates are skyrocketing. People are taking pharmaceuticals, going to their therapists who prescribe them. They are
indeed
not exactly intelligent or bright. If we're to believe these stories from the Bible, right? But if we're also looking at just people who, how should I put this? People who haven't given these ideas a chance, is there a connection between diet and mental health?
Absolutely. Absolutely, no question.
What do you and is there any research done on the Adventist way of living when done properly and rates of depression?
Yes, actually. In fact, Weimar, the Weimar Institute, which we've discussed earlier, I mentioned briefly earlier that, in fact, the Weimar Institute does have a program for depression and anxiety. Actually, it's one of the most effective programs out there for treating depression and anxiety, if not the most effective current program. Reason being, most of the issues that cause depression and anxiety are, in fact, lifestyle-based. There are some genetic factors and some factors that happen, developmentally, but by and large, those are only a couple of factors that take place. You've got another 8 categories of factors that are lifestyle-related that you can change. And even if you get rid of, if you get rid of everything else, or get rid of, as many as 7, oftentimes, of those factors, oftentimes, even if you still have a developmental hit and a genetic hit, and even if you have a disease hit, you will be able to remain depression and anxiety free because of lifestyle. Now, the studies that have shown depression as far as diet is concerned, folate is one of the major nutrients that is helpful, along with, as we've talked about before, omega-3s. Omega-3s are actually very beneficial as far as mental health goes, and of course, again, they feed them that not from fish, as it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier very well, but in fact, from plant-based sources such as flaxseed, chia seed, walnuts, and the like.
Okay, so
those are just 2 of the factors there, 2 of the nutrients there.
So let's
there are many more.
Let's give an example. We'll make up a person who has never tried any changes in lifestyle choices. They've relied on going to a doctor who prescribes them things that are basically like, a Band-Aid over a flesh wound, right? They haven't healed the flesh wound. They're still bleeding, but it sort of masks the blood, if you will.
Yeah.
At least for a certain period of time. And then there's often side effects from pharmaceuticals that sometimes are worse than the original disease or symptoms.
Yeah.
And I've even read that antidepressants sometimes can influence people to commit suicide.
Yes. Yes, it's one of the potential side effects.
As a teacher, I've met a student who had been put on so many medications that his family told me that he lost the will to work or to follow his interests in school or his hobbies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he'd been held back for 3 years in the 8th grade. And they put him on every single medication, and eventually they stopped the medications because they realized that the medications are actually making him worse. But now they feel that, they haven't put him on a good diet because they don't know the research about it. But they at least knew that all the pharmaceuticals weren't working. But now his will to live, his will to be interested in his hobbies, and it's all gone. Yeah. It's like dealing with somebody that almost died already, but they're still breathing.
Yeah.
And yet the government, schools, the public school system, the average therapist that one can go to, especially, the ones that prescribe drugs regularly, they seem to have not understood, you could say, our magic bean theory, right, on the food, right,
yeah.
or the 45 minutes of walking around in the hills or getting fresh air or whatever, right,
yeah.
Getting vitamin D or drinking water or just simply having some sort of life purpose greater than yourself.
Yeah.
Like, why don't they get it? Is it a conspiracy of profits from the pharmaceutical companies and corporations and a government that is tyrannical? What's going on here?
Well, I'm not really sure. Part of it is also because depression has only recently been recognized as an actual disease. Before, we just kind of classify it as just something that happened, your midlife crisis or whatever. It was just something that just kind of happened. And, just like the whole heart disease and atherosclerosis, it just happens as you get older. You just, when in reality, no, that's not the case. And there are different factors that affect, and just because we've only recently recognized that it's not just something that just happens, but it's actually a disease that has causes and a cure. Therefore, we're only just starting to figure out what the causes really are, and as a result, we're still trying to figure out what the cures really are. Now, what's interesting also is the fact that there are more things today that cause depression than there ever have been in the history of humankind. For example, that we're exposed to one of the categories of risk factors for depression is toxins in the environment. We're more exposed to atmospheric and environmental toxins than we ever have been before. Things like mercury, lead, and other heavy metals are more common now in the air and in the water and in the food that we eat. There's also hepatitis. Certain types of hepatitis and other diseases increase your risk of depression. And those things are more common as a result of, say, STDs or alcoholism or different things like that that tend to damage your liver or have an effect thereon. There's also things, lifestyle choices and habits, such as video games, which are very prevalent these days. Video games, movies, not all documentaries and things like that don't necessarily fall in that same category, but action movies and these high-paced, rapid scene of reference changing films tend to increase the risk. Then, of course, there's also music. Certain types of music will increase your risk for depression. It's just overall, there's a bunch of different things that affect our, and of course also with, I'm sure people have heard of seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, which is something that affects people in places like Washington or in the northern climates where there's just not enough sun in the wintertime. And that also actually has proven something that is linked to depression. Not so much the SAD itself, but the lack of sunshine early in the morning has been, and circadian rhythm hits that actually have been shown to increase your risk of depression.
So let's take a look at Adventists as a group. And the ones that I'm wondering about are the ones that follow the 8 principles: the diet, the nutrition, the sunlight, the water, the life purpose, the veganism, etc. Nature walks, you name it. Is Adventism of the ones that still are orthodox? Are they the ones seeing the greater health benefits as far as mental health?
Absolutely. In fact, if you look up at Weimar again, you'll find a whole bunch of Adventists who follow those tenets and lifestyles. And I would wager that if there was a survey done or a depression test done up there, by and large, you would have almost, you would not see the average college or even the average American statistics as far as depression goes. You might have had people who had depression up there, or who are, maybe a little bit at risk because they're coming from families and homes that may not, or environments that may not necessarily be as conducive. But when you actually look at the statistics there, I would be willing to wager a hefty amount of money that you don't, you won't find that up there.
And there has been,
or at least it won't be.
There has been, I know, one peer-reviewed study that said that there was an association with greater mental health and sort of the Adventist plant-based diet. And that makes sense, because if it's making you not get heart disease and diabetes and cancer, and you name it, those are organic, you could say, physical manifestations of a bad lifestyle choice, which equals responsibility. I know we're not supposed to talk about personal responsibility, right? Because everything...
It's not politically correct, right, but it's true.
But, yeah, but I mean, if we know, and it's easy for us to say, like, yeah, we know what causes heart disease. We know what causes diabetes, or at least we have a good clue, just based on diet. Isn't it? I mean, it just makes sense that what you eat and what you consume and what you're thinking, I think we have 60,000 thoughts a day or something like that. And if most of your thoughts are, I am a horrible person and my life sucks and, I want to kill myself, then yeah, I mean, you're going to get a really bad attitude and, the world hates me versus, positive thinking and that type of thing. But I would also imagine that if depression and anxiety are in some way biological, not just cognitive thoughts, right?
Yeah.
That it has to be, if we're saying it causes heart disease, it's also plugging up the mind and causing dementia and probably anxiety and depression too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Really, it gets back to the car analogy. As I mentioned, towards the start of the program or the, podcast here, I stated that, I use the analogy that our bodies are like cars. You have a certain fuel that it runs off of, and if you don't run it exactly the way that the manufacturer, you don't put in, if it's a sports car and it runs off of premium fuel only, you don't stick it on regular gas. It just doesn't work. It's gonna gum up the engine and everything else. It's not the ideal fuel. And then of course with people trying to stick transmission fluid in the gas tank, with protein and versus carbohydrates, it overall doesn't, it overall gums up the works and makes everything, our bodies are amazing machines. They really are. They are fantastic, and they do the best they can. But when you just mess with it for too long, it just causes a whole bunch of problems. And whether it's you're not giving it the right fuel, or you're not getting it out and working enough. You're not keeping it maintained. You're not thinking the healthy thoughts. You're not. Whatever it is, ultimately you're going to gum up the works, and it's going to make a big mess. It's just, that's just the way it is. And so, that being said, with the mental health, that's part of the machinery as well. And if you don't have the right fuel, well, you're not going to have the right, the best thoughts and the best ability to cope with situations.
Now, I think you'd agree that thoughts matter. Cognitive thoughts matter.
Absolutely.
Not everything is biological. I mean, or at least, well, let's put it this way. We are biological beings, but what we believe and what we think is true, there's a mind-body...
Has an effect on us, yeah.
There's a mind-body connection between what we believe to be true about ourselves and how we feel about ourselves and how we interact with the world out there. So, for example, this is known in placebo studies. If a doctor, and you trust your doctor, and your doctor gives you sugar pills, and you think that it's a cure, oftentimes your body, just through the mere suggestion of you will be cured, will cure itself. And on the opposite end of that spectrum, there's the nocebo effect, where it's been shown that, I'll give you an example, in the Caribbean voodoo magic, a witch doctor will, have the classic doll and the classic needle, and they'll, say, when I put this needle through your back, you will feel a sharp pain, and then when I take it out, you will not feel that pain. And because they believe in the witch doctor so much, right, they will actually feel a sharp pain in their back. So whether it's placebo, making people feel better, suggestion, right, or nocebo, it's been shown that the power of autosuggestion, that what you're thinking, like if you go around your day and you think, I am a bad person, nobody loves me, well, chances are, that becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, but what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's, we are what we think. It's not just, it's, if you look at, say, cognitive behavioral therapy and what it teaches, I'm a firm, staunch believer in that. Our thoughts lead to our thoughts lead to our feelings, which lead to our actions. And so, if we're faced with a certain situation, it's not so much what that situation does to us as what we think about that situation. But, let's say, for example, somebody is, well, I'll take an example from the Bible. You look at when Paul and Silas, the two apostles, were imprisoned. They were beaten with rods and whips and, cat o' nine tails several times over. And they went into prison. Their feet were put up in stocks in this really nasty environment. And lo and behold, what should happen? But they're singing. In this environment, they're singing, they're praising God. They're not saying, "Oh, poor me, poor us."
Yes.
If you look at today's pop psychology, they would have been imagining themselves in like a beach, that would have lasted for about 5 seconds, and they would have been this, miserable wreck, right?
Right.
Well, what was the difference is their belief system.
Yes.
What they believed, changed how they felt about the situation.
Yeah.
They believed that it was a good thing, a blessing that they were being persecuted the way they were, and as a result, they were able to to be this happy, joyful, praising, and everyone was wondering, what the heck is wrong with these two people?
And that, to me, is just proof of the power of our mind. And whether you say, God is supernaturally doing it, or whether you say, it's this natural thing that our brain can heal itself from pain. The mind-body connection. Whether that's in a prison cell, and you're a Jewish Holocaust survivor like Viktor Frankl, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where he's just, day in, day out. There's, he has to think of a reason to live, right? And the reason to live is what is the effect I want, the purpose of, and for him it might have been writing a book, getting out of the concentration camp, or continuing his philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And for other people it might be living to see your loved ones, or it might be there's just so many reasons, but the idea is that it's the attitude, the expectation, the belief that makes you whole. Like in the Bible, I'm not Christian, but Jesus says your faith has made you whole. Go, and you've been healed. The blind man, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing is true of attitudes. Like your attitude and your beliefs determine your action. And if you believe that you can't do something, and you tell yourself you can't do something, and other people around you tell you, right, then chances are you won't be able to do it. Right?
Yeah.
And I think this is important with depressed people, because depression has this quality of you ruminate, right?
Yeah.
You ruminate over and over and over the same thoughts, right? And they're all negative. And you've experienced depression, I know. I hope I'm not revealing too much by saying that, because we've talked before about it. But it's the idea of rumination, where you kind of repeat these negative auto-suggestions in your brain, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I'll go to a therapist and they'll give me a drug and that will cure it. But does it really cure it if you haven't changed the suggestions and the thoughts? Or are we just masking it by giving them a pharmaceutical? What do you think?
Oh, my word. It's really, I mean, if you get down to the bottom line, it's just something that, these pharmaceuticals and things like that, they have their place. Again, I'm not saying that they're not something that's that can be useful in certain situations, especially in relieving, critical situations. But when you have something that's just overall, for a cure, you're not going to get it from pharmaceuticals. You're just not going to. It's just not going to happen. Many pharmaceuticals actually make the problem worse. As you mentioned, that case study of that young student that you dealt with.
Right.
Many of these, depression really is a disease of something called the frontal lobe of the brain. It's the main portion of the brain that deals with rational thought and executive function. And when what happens in depression is that that's suppressed. I mean, there's other things too, but that's really the bottom line. That's the part of the brain that's the most affected. And so when you have something like that with depression, many of these medications actually suppress the frontal lobe even more. And so it just makes the problem overall worse, when in reality what you need to do is enhance the frontal lobe. You need to enhance these things. You need to get the blood pumping to it rather than drawing further away from it. And so, the only thing that's going to do that is positive lifestyle choices. Things, whether it's thinking healthy thoughts or avoiding addictive behaviors or eating healthy foods or exercising and drinking a good amount of water, just different things, different positive lifestyle choices. That's what's going to affect you more than anything else in curing depression, really. And the Dr. Medley Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program that comes out of the Weimar Institute, it does exactly that. And the response rates are incredible. Even in the programs where they come out and do it in your community, for depression, there's a 95% response rate. That's not necessarily a cure rate, but that's where people will respond to it positively. And then, of course, you have, the anxiety as well, which is 93% for depression, and 95% for anxiety.
And
that's incredible.
What do they do in the program for a depressed person? Can you lay out the program for us?
A little bit. There's a lot of education that goes on. So they have, whether it's presentations given by Dr. Neil Medley himself, if you're in the residential program, or recorded presentations of that in the community program where they come out to see you. There's that aspect where you have the educational, you learn about the causes of depression, and you learn about the different things. There's a workbook that goes with it, I believe in both cases, where you learn about these different things. You learn about these different...
and don't they put them on
and you implement it.
Don't they put them on like a regimen of exercise of some sort that's fairly intense?
In the residential program, yes. They put them on a very strict schedule. They wake them up at 6 in the morning, have them walk a lot. They have lots of hydrotherapy. They feed them at specific times. And just in general, they are put on a strict regimen as far as scheduling and exercise and food goes.
I remember,
and of course you have...
Nedley said that it was like 3 hours of exercise a day or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. It's amazing. And in fact, do even more if it's somebody who's dealing with addictions, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever all.
Yes. Now, this I think is very important, because we've talked about, okay, we want to sell you the magic beans, right? If you will.
Yeah.
We want to give you the vegan, whole plant-based diet. But to really get you out of the funk of addiction or depression or whatever it might be, this sort of 3 hours a day of aerobic exercise or whatnot. It sounds like it's a fairly critical element of, if you're really
exercise
is really down there, you have to do that, otherwise you're not going to get the same effects of the cure.
Exactly. You see, the way I like to think about it is, if you have a car, if you don't run it, it's just going to break down, right? That's why, people, you periodically start a car. Even if it's just sitting in the driveway, you got to do it. Otherwise, it's just going to decay and eventually just not start. Same thing with the body. If you don't get your body up and going, then it's just going to get up and decay. And that's just how it is. No matter how healthy you eat, if you don't exercise. In fact, there have been studies that show that if you don't smoke and you don't exercise, you'll actually not live as long as somebody who smokes and exercises, which is pretty amazing considering how important smoking, how terrible smoking is.
And everybody knows, like, oh, don't smoke. That's pretty widely understood. But not everybody probably knows that, oh, and by the way, if you're not exercising, that's worse than smoking for your health, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we get people, because one, imagine the average American is eating hamburgers every day, on their couch, eating Cheetos, watching television or whatever on the internet, right?
Yeah.
And they're depressed, they're overweight, they're obese, they're just trying to live this life. And here we come along and we say, by the way, to get you out of your funk, you're going to do 3 hours of exercise a day. We're going to put you on this vegan, whole plant-based diet, right? First of all, that's like, coming up to a person and trying to grab their cigarettes and their Twinkies, and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be a hard sell, and I wonder...
Yeah, what's got to happen is a change in beliefs. Somebody who smokes, the reason that they stop smoking or they want to stop smoking is because they believe that they need to. And those that actually manage to do it, the reason is because they have the willpower to maintain that. The same thing, and there are different ways of increasing your willpower. Some of those is exercise and other things like that. These other lifestyle changes actually help. And why? It all comes back to the frontal lobe of the brain. When you're dealing with addiction, when you're dealing with depression, anxiety, and anything else that's mental, if you're dealing with something that, you need to make a change, you need to do something, you need to do this. Now, it won't ever negate your necessity to make the choice to do it. You ultimately need to say, I am going to do this, and actually follow through with that. You will never be compelled to do it by your other choices. You need to make the choice to, someone who's stopping smoking can say, oh, I'm going to someday, or I'm going to stop smoking, all they want, but until they actually follow through with that, But they need, once they make that decision, once they believe firmly enough to choose to change, that's when stuff will happen. And the only way you're going to maintain that willpower is if you make these positive lifestyle choices. It's going to give you vast amounts of, vast improvements on that willpower. But not only that, as a Christian, I do believe that's something that, you have that belief in a higher power. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous works so well. They don't even say it's necessarily, they don't name the God necessarily, whether it's a Christian God or Buddhist, right. Buddha or whoever. They just say the belief in a higher power. And, that's why, again, the frontal lobe is actually the seat of spirituality, if you look at that. And if that's one of the best ways to to improve it's another way to improve your frontal lobe function. And that's why if you look at people who are fundamentalists, many times they actually, not all, but in many cases, fundamentalists actually have lower rates of depression. And it's, now not all religions are that way, but many fundamentalists do have lower rates, especially fundamentalist Christians, although it, again, depends on the lifestyle and some of the teachings, of course, as well. But if you look at many of these, true Bible-believing Christians as an example, they actually will have lower rates of depression. Now, I'm not talking about, and I'm not just talking about Adventists, but I'm not talking about these things that are necessarily, barbecue Christians either.
BBQ Christians. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're not against BBQ Christians, just so our
No,
listeners
absolutely
know.
not.
I just kind of use
Yeah, got to put that out
I
there.
kind of use that as a joke to distinguish between Adventists, or at least the Orthodox Adventists, who are mostly vegetarian or vegan, with the ones who partake in McDonald's and In-N-Out and
We have no there's no animosity or anything like that against these groups. There's just an obvious difference.
But I want to, going back to, because I think this is critical. Most, if most people believed over the course of a few hours of our episodes, what we were telling them, right? If we were able to sell them the magic beans, if you will.
Yeah.
They might have the intellectual capacity and even believe in the science of what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
And yet, as in the Bible, it talks about the Peter, I believe it was, the spirit is...
It's willing, but
Yes,
weak.
the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I think this perfectly describes whether you're religious or not, or of a different religion.
Yeah.
The common human experience, which is, you shouldn't eat that cupcake, or you shouldn't, engage in that activity, or you shouldn't smoke, or whatever.
You shouldn't. Yeah.
That it's not good for you logically. You know it intellectually.
Yeah.
You know what the data says. But because willpower alone is such a, the flesh is weak part of it.
Yeah.
I believe that it's something in addition to willpower is needed to get over the hump that humans
Yes.
find themselves in.
And that's where something outside of yourself comes in. Now, I'm not just talking about necessarily a religious power, but somebody else, an accountability partner might be, helpful.
Yeah.
Something that, someone to keep you there. I don't know if that's exactly where you were heading, but that's something that is important. That's kind of my function.
Yes, that's one.
As a lifestyle coach.
Yes, it can come from a god or a deity or outside yourself. It can come from a lifestyle coach, another human that's also outside, right? So you could say, well, it's a human that's going to help you, or it's a god that's going to help you. But what I would, and both are meaningful and can work. But what I'm adding to that is in addition to willpower, because willpower is something that is inside of us, right? It is we are the mover of the uncaused, if that makes sense. Like, we make the choice and we determine our destiny. But there's another element that I think that human beings need to make them do, or at least can facilitate change, and that is the emotional things that we tell ourselves. And so I'll give you an example. So I went to the gym I met a lady there, and she said to me, and she was overweight, and she said, I know that I need to exercise. I know I need to do this, but when I get to the gym, I don't want to exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do sometimes is I'll come here and I'll sit in the gym. I'll kind of look around, and then I won't have the willpower, and I'll get in my car and I'll go home, right? And I think this is a common human problem, right? Now, I've also learned through the study of suggestion and hypnosis that human beings are not convinced always through rationality or reason, but they're convinced to do an action through their emotions, right?
Yes.
And in fact, if you can connect with them emotionally, whether that be through some religious argument or something else, you're more likely to see change in the human. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so logic alone, although important, doesn't produce human action. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So...
Absolutely. You have, you look at, for example, the three ways of connecting, of making an argument: logos, ethos, and pathos.
Yes.
You're referring, logos would be, logic or the spoken word, information. Pathos would be the emotion that you're talking about, and of course, ethos is authority.
Yeah, and the thing that typically leads us humans, because we're logical beings, but we're also emotional beings, is that
Yes.
We have this emotional impulse to do an action. Some of those actions are good, some of those actions are bad, but that's sort of the fire of action, is emotion, or getting us in that state. So an example of this can be visualization. So in sports psychology, oftentimes if you're an athlete, there are two things you can do to train as an athlete. There's the sort of the physical body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you work out. And then there's the sports psychology end of it, where you do what's called visualizations. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
So basically what you do is you visualize yourself. First you put yourself in sort of a state of relaxation and calmness, and you visualize yourself, making the basketball shot. Or you visualize yourself making the goal, if it's soccer or whatever it is. You visualize the feelings that you're going to have when you're successfully making the goal, right? So you might imagine the crowd cheers, or you might imagine your body running down the field and what that feels like, right?
Yeah.
And so you're having this visualization, and it's all positive, right? It's affirming and positive. And there's studies that have shown that if you imagine before you go to the gym, if you have a visualization of you going to the gym, right?
Yeah.
And working out certain parts of your body, the muscle memory, it's essentially your body has been primed, it's been conditioned, that the body thinks it's already worked out before it actually has begun, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so your thoughts matter. I mean, if we turn to the Christian model, if you think of a woman, right, if you lust upon a woman, you've already committed adultery.
Yeah.
In your mind, in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with going to the gym. If you think of the gym, right?
Yeah.
And you imagine the gym, the gym experience, it's the same thing, right, as if going to the gym. And I've actually tried this and again, these are all just principles of autosuggestion and hypnosis. There's lots of science backing this up.
Yeah.
I've tried it where I had no willpower, right, to go to the gym. So I just did, I relaxed for a moment, maybe 10 minutes or whatever, and got myself into this relaxed state. And then I did some visualizations of me going into the gym. And previous to this, I had no willpower to actually exercise that day, right? I had like zero willpower. Like, I'm not going to do it. But by doing, by creating suggestions in my mind and visualizations and, which is what great athletes do, who are professional, you essentially create a pattern or a list of cognitive beliefs, right? We talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, we have the cognitive and the behavioral, and we have visualization.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, it's a lot like, I kind of compare it a little bit to prayer. When you pray, you visualize, you speak to the deity, right? And I think that's why religion matters, because religious folks, unlike secular folks aren't doing much visualizations. Maybe they don't know the science, or they just, but religions naturally teach you visualizations through prayer, right? They teach you positive, I'm thinking of the Lord's Prayer, for example. If you just go through the Lord's Prayer and you repeat that, you're already creating visualizations of forgiveness, right? I don't know the rendition of it. Maybe you know it better than I do. But essentially, you're creating that spark of visualization where you're forgiving your enemies for those who curse and abuse you, or you're preparing yourself against, say, temptation, right? You might say, and if you say those words in a prayer, or you're doing it through relaxation or, self-hypnosis, or whatever it is that you're using, meditation, it really does create something that is beyond willpower, that is very emotional, right? Because when I'm doing the visualization, it's all emotional. I'm not giving myself facts and data, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying, well, if I do this leg push-up, I'll have a 10% chance less that I will die or something. I'm not giving myself some fact. I could, during the visualization, but I'm mostly just saying, oh, you will feel very, very good when you, do that bench press or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that is the fire of emotion. And I think it's really needed. I think I've realized that willpower, I read an entire book on willpower, and they gave a lot of good things, but they never taught me how to use emotions or visualizations or autosuggestion or hypnosis to create action. I think that's important, even whether you're religious or not. But I think when you're praying, you're creating thoughts, right? You're having thought. If you say, I don't know what your prayers are like, but if you have a prayer in the morning and the prayer in the evening, right? Those are auto-suggestions, right? You're suggesting to your mind good things that you want to accomplish and you want God to help you, right? Without those suggestions, whether you're a religious person or non-religious, if you don't have these thoughts, if you don't have these emotions, you're unlikely to achieve the goals in life you set for yourself. But what do you think? From your perspective?
I think you're definitely right.
Yeah. And I actually think, as I've talked to some people with depression, what are they doing? They're creating suggestions in their mind that are basically, rumination is negative thoughts, right?
Yes.
Like you repeat the same thought over and over and over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, oh, well, what if it was this way? Like, no, it can't be that way. I will always suffer from this mental illness. I can never be cured.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell are you talking about? Oh, and then it's like, you're self-righteous. You think it's all, personal responsibility, and you're blaming the victim who has the mental illness, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'm not blaming you. I'm just trying to give you another idea of what might cure you, right?
Yeah.
Because the other way is...
Obviously isn't working.
Yeah, and it's not working for society.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, that's sort of my monologue. My rant.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen. I guess my struggle is, as we talk about health, is how do we get these good ideas, these good emotional states in the human so that we can keep with the progress.
Well, remember the tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
What you believe influences how you feel.
Yeah.
If you go for the beliefs, you'll actually end up changing people's feelings as a result.
And in fact,
and so you just and that's all you can do. Now, that doesn't mean just provide them with information, but actually going for their core beliefs, what they believe about themselves and about society. Somebody who believes that they are a horrible person, they just are, whatever, all bad thoughts. It doesn't matter what, you gotta, it doesn't matter what you feed them. It doesn't matter what, if they believe that, they're always going to believe that until that's changed. Those are not healthy thoughts, and they're going to be this, unhappy, unhealthy person, no matter how good they are outwardly, if they don't have their beliefs changed. And so that's really the bottom line. That's really kind of the core of it. If you change someone's beliefs, or, which sounds a little, it flies in the face of everything that our culture supposedly stands for. If we mess with someone's core beliefs, that's politically incorrect and all that. But no, it's not true. If you change someone's beliefs, it really can make a difference. And I think that's really the best way to just kind of end this program, because I do have others,
we're coming on
I really do think that, but it's just something that, we definitely, that's kind of the bottom line. It's our belief system. As I mentioned before, it's not any one thing per se. It's a combination of different things. But if you really boil it all down to it, the only way you'll be able to make any changes in your life is if your belief system is changed. I can testify from personal experience. I wasn't always, I was always an Adventist, but I wasn't always an Orthodox. And it was not until I started discovering these Orthodox principles, and my belief system was actually actively being changed. Yeah. And it wasn't until then that I actually started seeing these differences in my life. And, it's as a result of the changing in the belief system. Yeah. It's not just a change in information.
Yes.
That's one thing.
And it's important.
But it's an actual change in the way that I believe.
Yeah, and it's important that if you're going to program yourself, that it be as close to science as possible, close to objective truth as possible. And
yes, absolutely.
The thing is that if you're not doing the programming, you're allowing other people to program you. So, for example, we talk about the flickering of a TV, right? And the hypnotic state that people are being put in through technology.
Yeah.
They're being essentially hypnotized and brainwashed into suggestions. That's why advertising works so well. Like, you find yourself in a store buying something that you don't need because on the radio that day you heard a song that you thought you weren't listening to, but it worked on an unconscious level when you were driving, right? And you're like, wow, I'm going to buy this. I don't know why I need it, right? But all the advertising I got, those 5 commercials or whatever that I got over the week that I thought I wasn't listening to, right, actually affected my action in buying this stupid thing that I don't even need. And I think that happens in our own brains. We're creating advertisements of anxiety or depression.
I like that analogy.
We're creating things, and people are also feeding us information. Our mom says, if we grew up in a bad home and mom and dad didn't love us and said, "You're a stupid child," that's an advertisement. The child starts believing in it. And if you're in if you're in a hypnotic state and you're filling your mind with good thoughts and positive affirmations and good prayers and good lifestyle and good friends, and they're all giving you positive suggestions about yourself, right? The chances are is you're gonna be pretty happy and you're gonna be healthy. But if everyone around you kind of gives you bad advertisements, right? Meat is good,
drink milk.
Take an antidepressant, go to your therapist, go through, if you're getting the bad advertising and you're getting hypnotized and brainwashed daily through all this bad stuff, through the radio, TV, internet, and even religion, right? ISIS and terrorism, if it's not the right, if it's not a positive religion, right? Then it's going to make all the difference emotionally to you. And I think really if we're not, and we can end it here, and I'm sure we'll have you back to have more conversations, but I kind of feel like if we don't take thought for what is being placed in us, and if we repeat, if I repeat in my mind the words, every day in every way I'm getting better, and I have cancer, or I say a prayer and ask God for healing, whether religious or secular, that's going to affect your brain.
Yes.
And your brain your unconscious mind is going to accept what you feed it over and over again, even if it's a lie. Or even if in the beginning you're not healthy, but you tell yourself you're healthy, right? You don't ruminate, you're not depressed, right? Or at least you don't allow your depression to rule your brain. Then the chances of you getting better are astronomically improved. So,
absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming, or rather, getting on your phone today, right? And being interviewed. We'll probably break it up into 2 episodes because I now have about 2 hours. And we'll definitely have you back. There's probably a number of things we didn't even get to. But I think the things that we got to today were important. I think they're going to help a lot of people out there who happen to listen in. And I want to thank you for your time.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on here.
And now, as we end this has been a podcast from the Trans Global Dialogue podcast. I am your host, Marvin Whitaker, and it has been my pleasure to interview a very smart and intelligent William Westerhout, as I call him jokingly. And now we'll be signing off. Until next time.